Welcome to this hour here on KTN News. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. This hour we are looking at the way it is, and in studio with me I've got the Mombasa Senator Omar Hassan, and we also have an advocate of the High Court and legal expert William Okech, and we have a renowned lawyer, Kenyan lawyer, that is Ambrose Weather. I think I should find a more enticing way to introduce you. Yeah?
Senior counsel will work so perfectly.
Senior counsel.
Everybody calls
Senior
him
counsel.
so
Ambrose Weather in studio. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on this edition of The Way It Is. Now we are going to talk about what's making headlines around the country, and feel free to take part in the conversation. You can use the hashtag The Way It Is, or you can use the bigger hashtag, that is Morning Express KTN, and the Twitter handles at KTN News, at KTN Kenya, at Joy Doreen Bira. We'll start with TICAD, which I guess has been the bigger event of the week. They say 600 million shillings was spent in organizing this entire event. But then they say 12 billion shillings is what we are going to rip out of it. Do you think that this is actually a good way of looking at it, or are we being overambitious with the figures? 12 billion shillings, Ambrose Weather.
Thank you. I think we look at the benefits of having such a conference.
Mm-hmm.
One, the fact that the world focuses on the country, just like when Obama came,
Yeah.
the whole world focuses on the country, gives the country a big name.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd see sometimes when you travel outside this country and you say you are Kenyan, and somebody says, let me use the word Congo.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'll be asked, Congo in Kenya? It shows you, it's a good thing. So when we have such conferences, it's good. Then secondly, we expose our businessmen, and we expose, they also expose, they come to see what we have.
Mm-hmm.
So at a cost of, let's say, $500 million organizing security, and Kenyans also bringing their vehicles to transport and so on, the benefit, if you look at economic benefit, is much higher. But then the eventual conclusion, you see some of these bilateral talks and then conclusions.
Yeah.
You end up getting more. You saw Kenya will get about 10 billion.
10 billion, yes.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and that is a plus.
Mm-hmm.
Above all, what I say would be the biggest, we as a country should learn that the way forward is to be able to make something valuable that we can sell outside.
Right.
Here, as we talk, even in this studio, everything comes from Japan. When you go to Japan, there's nothing from Kenya. We should learn
Well, yeah,
to
if you look
actually...
at the imbalance of trade,
Yes.
I think we managed to export $28 million.
Yes.
That was last year.
And maybe there are a few curious here, a few there, ivory there, stolen there. We are not measuring in making something.
Yeah.
And the only way to make is to make something valuable which the world is looking for, and then you send it over. I always say, you don't look for the money.
Yeah.
You become valuable, and money looks for you.
All right.
When you want a Prado, Japan will not send it to you.
Yeah.
Actually, you send the money to them, you beg them to give it to you, and you kneel down before them. And we used to have coffee. We have tea. Let us make something as a country valuable which we export. Otherwise, it's a good thing. And I think in the last 2 years, Kenya has seen very high-powered conferences that has put us in a better state than a neighboring country where they're being ruled like locally.
All right, Senator.
First and foremost, bottom line, Japan is a good partner to embrace. I have more inclinations toward Japan more than all some of its eastern partners, because Japan, first of all, is a democracy, and secondly, it has some values in terms of Japanese etiquette, in terms of professionalism, workmanship, originality. So Japan, is up there. The only thing I take issue is what I was told they patented the Chiondo, which I think was really not right. But outside that, Japan is an astral partner. And that's why I, for the first time in a long time, I accepted the inconvenience of Japan bringing us 23 presidents, 9 prime ministers, and 5 vice presidents, a whooping 37 governments were represented here, and I think the rest were also represented by the foreign ministers. For me, before I saw a busy airport. I commute to this airport almost daily.
Every day.
I came in, I saw 2 big 747s by Japan. When you see a country is able to dock or taxi 747s, just because they've shipped logistics and human personnel.
Well, he
Just-
seemed to have
he
flown
shifted the
over
entire
the entire
infrastructure
private
here.
sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Number two, I saw the galaxy of usual African leaders, jets which were just lined up, from that one of Uganda
Yeah.
to Cote d'Ivoire to Mali to everybody.
Uganda.
I don't want to talk about
yeah,
that
they do.
Yes,
plane.
absolutely. So I saw all of them taxed. And for the first time, I accepted the inconvenience.
Yeah.
Because I also toured Kenyan hotels in Nairobi. All of them were full. Every hotel, even new hotels that I didn't know of, had this some hotel in the whole tune.
Yeah.
You know, you find a registration desk written TICAD. So hotels were, I think if Kenya government spent 600 million in an organization, we must have benefited in that region about 2 billion
Yeah.
for that period of time in
Yeah.
terms of actual expenditure into our economy. Because if each and every hotel in Kenya, in Nairobi, was full, then you can be sure that that was 10,000 delegates. If they came from all over the world, you know what kind of impact.
So you think
that
the
brought.
12 billion was matched with what we were given directly by the Japanese government, the 10 billion plus an extra 2 billion that came from...
I think we did well, and,
Yeah.
and also in terms of the positioning, you know, when when something is good, you just must say it. In terms of the positioning, you see, these friends of ours in the West, Britain, the United States, France, they are slapping us with travel advisories. For heaven's sake, they are killing our economies. You know, just because they're telling their people not to come here. When their people are not coming here, capital also takes flight, and many other things. Japan is telling the world, go to Kenya. You know, Japanese intelligence, if they have one, they must be having one, is saying Kenya is safe.
Yeah.
Kenya is a partner. Kenya is a strategic partner. Kenya is focal. Kenya is Africa, for that matter, because I think right now we've been organizing and mobilizing all of Africa in many things. So on that score, I think that's why I'm saying we look to the east, but more this east, when I'm talking about east, I mean Japan,
Yeah.
so that we can be able now to take advantage and let them transfer personnel, let them transfer. And you know, I'm told in Japan, you can't go and cut a deal. So if you're there building an SGR, it will be value for money, a penny for penny, because they'll give you technical support. They have laws that govern these types of investments, but including how they take care of personnel that are working within Japanese type of support programs and projects, so that there must be a certain decorum, a certain minimum, a certain labor ethic. So I think for me, I want to accolade. I mean, Japan is a good ally.
It's doing pretty
Japan
well.
focused on it, and then. Despite the inconvenience of traffic, it wasn't that,
It wasn't as bad this time.
it wasn't that, not even bad, it wasn't that outrageous as Obama's. You know, you lock our airspace for an hour, you lock it out again for another hour,
You jam the networks.
Jam our networks, stop our traffic. I mean, and then I don't even, apart from the fact that I think Obama was coming here symbolically, because he cannot come. If he did not come as president, we probably would not have embraced him as much if he came as a former president. So, and I'm yet to see the real effect of that forum. But this particular one, I can tell you, Japan has such a high level of accountability. They are not an empire per se, as they used to be. So they are a democracy. So when I know that they will be taken to task to demonstrate value for money.
All right, William, do you think maybe we should have twisted the question and turned it around? Do you think TICAD is going to benefit by coming to Africa?
I think my colleagues are quite right. The immediate net benefits of being a host country in terms of direct expenditure to the hospitality industry, but then also in terms of the deals that came out of those talks. I think some of those benefits will be spread out in the long term in terms of how do our SMEs benefit, because that is where the economic jump starting will start in terms of Vision 2030. Knowledge sharing in terms of innovation, in terms of value addition to our products, because for a very long time we found that Kenyan products have been locked out of the international markets because of value addition.
Right.
Yes, we need to invest more in value addition so that those markets are opened up. So those deals, they ought to be deals that will not sell the soul of the country, but deals that will open up our middle and income earning people to get into those markets.
All right.
Yeah.
So what we've seen is a huge imbalance of trade.
Oh, yes.
You know, what compared to what Japan brought into Kenya in the last year, $363.5 million as opposed to our 28 million going into Japan. I think those are very extreme figures.
Oh, yes.
But what do we need to do? What areas can we identify in Japan that we can actually reach that imbalance of trade? Senator, I'll start with you.
I mean, it's hard because you see, Japan transfers technology, transfers certain elements.
Yeah.
For us, I think what we're looking at is our industry, particularly our economy is still heavily agriculture. So it's, and unless we diversify to products that are competitive in the international market, we are a regional leader when it comes to industry. We export literally to all the other Eastern African markets or commercial markets. But you are at pains to identify why it is that you can transfer to Japan, because it is likely that a country of that magnitude of technology and innovation is more likely to transfer to you. So it's a question of can we ask them that, you know, if we import more, you take more of our tea, you take more of our coffee, you take more of our agricultural products, including flowers. You know, those are countries where men, unlike here, where they take flowers to their wives and things of that nature. So I think that's a fashionable thing. So we see how we can diversify. I mean, expand our exports to Japan.
All right.
Yes. Certainly, I think all is not lost. We've got horticulture, which Kenya is very competitive on, flowers, and also we should also look at the food processing. We've got all manner of foods that if value addition is factored in, we can take it out. Talk of, we've got fish, you know. There is also issues of peanuts and groundnuts. We even have their companies which now in Kenya can be able to process peanut butter, you know, locally. If some of those food processing, we can pump more resources into that. And then I think I'm convinced we'll be able to improve on our earnings to those markets.
All right. You know, unlike China, where every time we see China coming into any African country, we have to ask questions like, what else, you know, are they coming in for? You know, it's always friends with benefits or business with benefits with China. But then with Japan, you know, there seems to be a certain level of trust. Are there any things we should worry about when dealing with Japan, Ambrose?
At the end of the day, behind every economic venture, there are vested interests that are embedded. So Japan is not coming here because it loves Kenyans, it loves East Africans, it loves President Uhuru. They're coming to cement their economic interests. Okay?
Right.
And these economic interests, they wouldn't mind if you import, if they import nothing from you. They wouldn't mind. As long as you buy and you need them, they wouldn't mind. Therefore, what Kenyans should also look at is we also should reduce our appetite for some of these things. You'll find that if you look at my household and Senator's household and his household, nearly everything is from Japan. Then even agriculture we're talking about, if you're eating oranges from Israel, we are eating apples from Israel, we are almost eating cabbages from Israel.
Well, we are also importing sausages from South Africa.
From South Africa. And grapes from South Africa. It actually means that our game is low. We need to up our game so that we also have something
But
we
what
are good
happened
at.
to buy Kenya and build Kenya?
Yeah, but there's nothing.
No,
Right.
There's nothing much.
Two things in my view.
Yes.
I agree with Weather to that extent. But we must protect local industry. These cheap imports from China and all over, we must stop them.
Yes.
We must put such heavy caveats on it so that we are able to promote the local industry. So I think you can't say build Kenya, buy Kenya, and you allow all these cheap imports from all over. And therefore, these cheap imports, I'm a Kenyan. I look for value for money in quotes. I'm not sure whether when I buy some of these products, it's value for money.
Yeah.
But then I go, probably Sarge Ceramics has a better deal in terms of tiles. But because then you find a tile which looks fairly nice from wherever it's imported from, which is far cheaper. So therefore, I think if we are sincere about protecting the local industry, the local markets, local industry, not market, then we must also have our own scheme in terms of how we protect these industries and give them that market so that they first are able to sell to Kenya. And in fact, even it means that you give them tax havens because you will increase, the turnover and therefore increased even the tax brackets. There
Yeah.
are incentives to all this.
Well, there was a time, I think the president noted that, you know, even government institutions were purchasing their furniture from outside of Kenya, and he ordered that at least the local companies be considered first. But it seems to be that the priority is always, you know, a foreign company. Maybe we trust the furniture from Japan or from Turkey more than we do our own.
We are with this perception
Yeah.
that if you put on a suit and say this is Italy, then you are of greater quality and standing.
There's more
than if you say it's
respect
in
attached to
Karasha.
it.
You know, I think of that nation.
Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I remember the man called Saul Busolo in charge of AFA.
Yeah.
In the last 6 months, 6 or 8 months, his institution and I think government has been very particular about imported sugar. And the space is such that the imports are minimal. And companies that are being well run are actually doing very well. I know Sony produces one of the best sugars in this region, in terms of processing, in terms of quality of cane, in terms of all these things.
But I agree with you.
But what makes us wobble is somebody goes there and collects some poisons called sugar in another country. He sneaks it through the Mombasa and is brought here, and it's cheap, okay? Thereby bringing us down. So when we say that, let us also buy whatever we have, but let it be quality. When
Well,
you put
you
it
know,
against the national standard, you say it is better, and we can do better.
But when you say sneak it in, you know,
Yes.
just the other, I mean, how many months ago, how many weeks ago, we
Yes.
had about 104 containers
Yes.
that just went mysteriously cleared
Yes.
at the port of Mombasa. And then later they say 9 have been recovered. How many more went
Yes,
missing?
that's the
95.
sneaking in I'm talking
Now,
about.
forget about the
Yeah.
illicit, but when it comes to what this social democracy is all about, is about having strong state in terms of protectionism. Some say that's dictatorship, but when an economy is weak and vulnerable, like Kenya is, let's not beat about the bush about it. We have a citizenry that is weak and vulnerable. Majority of us live below the poverty line.
Yeah.
Then you need strong state intervention. Yeah, and let African leaders, including Uhuru Kenyatta, not buy laissez-faire to this idea of a free market. There's no such thing like a free market.
Yeah.
The free market, our principal market is to protect, our principal objective is to protect our market. To protect our market by making sure that our people live with dignity. So you have a strong state that says we shall not import too much. You see the narrative, even with now the emergence of the social democratic movements re-emerges in Europe and in the United States.
Yeah.
It's about no more cheap imports, no more too many of these trading zones or whatever they are called. No more. We must have a state to come in and build some bit of dignity, provide water, sanitation to your people. So this is what we need to then also control some level of prices for in terms of
You know,
food.
do you know we import chips?
Yes, we do.
Chips.
Potatoes.
Yeah.
And potatoes, as you go to Kericho, wherever, and Limuru, all over, there's potatoes everywhere.
But how
then
do we consolidate? You know, like
No,
just
the
bring them
There are
all
certain
together
things you say
into
no,
one
as
market.
Zen
With
say.
Kenya also,
There are
we've not
things you
done-
say no.
We've
Alright.
not done well in terms of food processing.
You know, when we talk about Buy Kenyan, Build Kenya, we'll not finish the conversation. But now let's move on. The CJ interviews are beginning today, and the Judicial Service Commission will from today interview all the 37 candidates shortlisted for the positions of Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, and Judge of the Supreme Court. But then there's been a lot of controversy around these positions, starting from the Chief Justice, why some names were left out despite the fact that they had applied for the jobs. But then what are your expectations? You know, William, I'll start with you.
Oh yes, oh yes. Of course, there's been the issue of hue and cry about the shortlisting. It's a grey area because for any panel which is interviewing, it has always been by practice that you go through the applications on a standard criteria that you have defined, and you do the knockout, the elimination. Well, that's a matter which is in court. There are parties which have gone to court seeking to stop that process on that ground. We'll leave it at that. But then, as a legal practitioner, I think our expectation is for the process to culminate in a Chief Justice who will guard the independence of the judiciary. That is very important for us. Both the financial independence and the decisional independence, so that we do not go back to situations where you find that judges who are hearing cases are selected on the basis of some certain improper interests.
Yeah.
So independence is very important. And also a Chief Justice will be able to inspire confidence from the ordinary wananchi. Someone who will be able to have a vision, because with that vision, he'll be able to rally each and everyone, both within the institution and outside the institution, to follow that vision. And lastly, someone who is very hands-on, someone who is very familiar with the administrative processes of the entire judiciary, because it's big, it's huge, several courts across the country.
Okay,
Yeah.
and seeing that you're all from a legal background,
Yes.
I'm thinking you've had your different reservations about what has been going on. Ambrose, what do you think, what are your expectations this time around?
I hope the court, the judge, as Odongo, will not nullify the process. Although I think the way some people were left out, it was by fiat.
Yeah.
You just say we want 7, so prejudice and so on. It was not through criteria, because if it is criteria, what they asked for is what you check. And most of them I know provided this is where they have been so shortlisted earlier and they have succeeded. So I think despite those mistakes, the process should be allowed to go on a wider consideration. As a country, we need a Chief Justice. But my expectation, the kind of Chief Justice I want is one who will be told His Excellency President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta is online. And they can say, tell him to call me tomorrow at 11. I'm still busy. That's the kind of man I'm hoping we'll have at the top there.
Yeah.
One will say, I'll not pick that call for now, I'm still busy. In other words, somebody not only independent, but courageous, and above all, intelligent. But even if he's not very intelligent, if he chooses the right people around him,
Yes.
he will always be, it will always be okay.
He will appear.
Yeah.
All right,
And
Senator.
It is likely that if you have been able to make it to the shortlist of a Chief Justice,
Yeah.
that you might have possessed that basic minimum of intelligence. but that said and done, you see, for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going with an open mind, personally.
Yeah.
I'm happy the fact that the JSE has the sole discretion of appointing the Chief Justice. They don't have to submit 3 names to the presidency. That for me is a coup. Secondly, but I also saw that, so we forgot to mention something very important, that
Which is?
the president actually signed the interest rates bill. So
Oh, yeah, he
capping
did.
interest, which was extremely courageous of him. The banks were too complacent, thinking that he wouldn't sign it. But then going back to the Chief Justice question, yes, definitely, quite a number of these men and women don't have any big scandals per se. What I will do is I'll give anyone who gets finally appointed to Chief Justice and Deputy Chief Justice and
Yeah.
Supreme Court Judge, we'll give them the benefit of doubt. It is important to allow everybody to do a job that they're appointed to do. I have seen people we greatly expected to have results from who have been a total letdown. We removed the former IBC to put this IBC, and we still said they didn't do a good job. I know I've made various references to people I did not expect to deliver. I thought this was just an extension of, let's say, at that point, Kibaki, his regime, and that kind of craftiness into another level. But then they came up and did outstanding jobs. I was appointed by Kibaki myself, together with Maina Kiai and the team of commissioners that were there. We sat down as a collegiate. We said, listen, these are our friends. They might have appointed us here partly because we are familiar to them. But we have a job to do. So I want any Chief Justice who comes in to know that there's a job to do. His fidelity principally must be to the Constitution and the people of Kenya.
All right. And, well, speaking of interviews, there's some vetting going on. Last week, I think there was police vetting in Nakuru County. And there have been questions also on whether or not it's still relevant to, vet them and find out the source of their wealth, because clearly we are seeing most of them now, putting money in either their relatives' names or their friends' names so that it can't be traced back to them. But do you think that this vetting is really yielding any fruits, Senator?
Yeah. We were some of those who started this whole idea of police vetting. And our template extended just beyond resources. Whether how you transfer 24,000 shillings from this police officer to this police officer, and why did you transfer that 24,000 shillings to the female police officer. I
Yeah.
saw one of the cartoons, I think in The Nation or in The Standard, which showed that, you know, all we are doing is stripping them naked, really. And, you know, they showed this guy who only had his underwear on, and the panel was smiling that they were telling him to remove everything. So I think what we hoped to do was also, it was going to be more of a human rights performance audit. You know, a performance audit. Like,
Yeah.
today they are violators, people we know were presided over units of police that were presided over mass extrajudicial executions. We know people who've violated, former tormentors, people who've undertaken, you know, torture. And there would have just been a certain minimum standard in terms of the threshold of allegations that should have been able to say this is a human rights audit of the various police officers. Today, people who are in charge of Kwekwe squads, ATPU, every other, you know, violating police unit are still, you know, on top of things. In fact, they're in contention to be the next IG and deputy IG and everything. So I think that for me, the process it should have transcended. So just simply, you know, doing an audit of their finances and asking them, how did you get 2 million shillings? How is it supported by your salary? Relevant as it might be, but I think the spectrum should have been wider.
All right. Well, corruption has been put out there. Police has come out with Transparency International's bribery index. They say, you know, the police is one of the most corrupt in Kenya. But then again, what should we be looking out for from these officers as opposed to what we are seeing, you know, them just trying to find out the source of the wealth?
Yes, I think the panel should go beyond just resources. It should look at suitability in terms of integrity, Chapter 6 of the Constitution, in terms of their human rights values, you know, in terms of their training, you know, continuous professional development, because there are those who came into the force many years ago. Have they updated their knowledge? You know, do they attend trainings, seminars? Do they do that? And I think also all is not well because there has been murmurs of concern, even from within the Interior Ministry. The other time we were reading that the CS Kaiseri also was kind of questioning some of those processes because it has also been left all to itself. There has been no strong participation from the civil society as observers. So I think as it is right now, it's, there are dangers of it coming into another witch hunt of officers turning against themselves.
All right. Ambrose, where have we gotten it wrong?
I think you, once you are bitten, you are twice shy.
Twice shy.
We have seen a more professional vetting in the name of the vetting of judges and magistrates, which turned into a sick joke. They actually hurt people. They went out and hurt people. They smeared themselves with mud. You are cleared in the morning. Then in the afternoon, I don't know what if you carry some bags, you are returned back. So if that led by serious professionals turned into such a sick joke, these are the one. They are behaving like they are EACC, that they went to ask money, how did you get this money?
Yeah.
You know, when you can't make money, you think somebody else can't. And if he makes it, you think he's a thief. You get it? You know, we live in a society, as a lady, if you make money, we think you have been given.
Yes.
You get it?
It's true, actually. It's a very bad stereotype.
Your husband. If I make money, they think I've stolen.
Yeah.
People don't just believe you can do business as you work and make money. So this police vetting I see, it is just, it has turned into some joke, some kind of witch hunt. They're not looking at the things they were supposed to look at.
Yeah.
We must accept that at one point this country was heading to the dogs. People were bad. People were doing bad things. After the coming in of the 2010 Constitution, we started a renewal process. And the renewal process was basically to look at those with potential to improve, to become better.
Yeah.
It was not to finish people who made some mistakes while they were in the university or in colleges or whatever. So this vetting has turned into a witch hunt. You have more money than the person vetting you, you are in trouble.
Right.
The sooner they stop it or change direction,
And
the
speaking
better.
of witch hunt,
Yes.
members of parliament recommend that the EACC boss should leave office because of the information that he revealed or gave, and then it was conflicting information. But then again, as the EACC boss, you know, some people think he's being witch hunted for various reasons, that maybe he has been the person who has been cracking the whip, and now people had to find a loop, you know, to let him go. And that is the politics of Africa.
No, I said here when the whole issue began, that Kiniso should have just gone, and he was on the highway, and he is going, he didn't want to see it, but let him now see it. You see, these things, even, you know yourself, you introspect, and you know the truth, but you just hope it does not come out. So you play ping pong with people. If somebody comes and says, yes, my company, I'm no longer in it, but my wife is trading in it, my child is trading in it, yet the law is very clear.
Yeah.
As chairman of Sony, my wife cannot trade with Sony, my daughter cannot trade with him, my cousins cannot. Yet he admits before camera and everything, and it is a trading on some under circumstances which you say there was theft being investigated. You know, I call what Kinisu is doing is not only impunity, but he just laughs and pees on Kenyans. The sooner he leaves, the better.
But let me tell you
All
something.
right,
I was a commissioner myself,
Yeah.
and I used to remember the peer audit we used to have on one another. You know, when I was a commissioner, I endeavored not to even supply a pin to government. A pin. You know, some of these things, when you take public office, this is a matter of choices.
Yes.
It's a conflict of interest when you have massive interests there that are competing in a space where we know is so polarized through corruption and patronage. So I think what happens is, for me, it was been a conscious choice to avoid, you know, bidding and asking for favors from government and government agencies, to allow you to sit in that pedestal of audit. So I do recall that you could make every form of allegation about us, but you could never have any serious credibility or integrity issues with the commission.
All right.
Even when we took 10 shillings, you made sure that you returned it back to John Wamwanga, who was the chief finance officer at that time, and you made sure that it was receipted. And even when you saw the management letter, there were just very small issues about administrative, your filing system must be changed, updated, but nothing fundamental about people stealing. So as a commissioner, you must almost internalize that paradigm of being the Caesar's wife, that you must live almost like a saint, if not one.
Right.
Yes, yes,
William, let's hear from you. Do you think that he was playing snakes and ladders, as Ambrose says he was on the highway?
Oh, I think this process was manipulated from the start. Because candidates to such high-profile offices, there is intelligence that could be able to show that you are linked in this manner of thing.
Right.
But for a moment, we also needed to realize, and I've said this before, that one of the ways in which these cartels will cripple the fights against corruption is to make sure that that institution, which is the lead institution to fight corruption, is crippled in terms of organization, in terms of management. And it has been worrying that we had this continuous change of leadership at EACC, you know. But then for a moment I thought that Kinisu would be let go so that he continues. But the moment it came out, he made the confession in Parliament that he is still a signatory to that bank account which received those monies. Then that is a major conflict of interest.
Yeah, it is
Where the
conflict of
money is.
interest.
We should
All right.
just
Well, I guess now he has no choice.
Yeah,
He just has to
certainly.
leave, despite the fact
He has
that
actually committed offenses. He should, as he exits, we should meet him in court one, and I need to represent him so that I get chunk of that money also.
Okay, I didn't look at it that way. Now I'm starting to see the picture. All right, so there's so many tweets here from Mombasa, I should say. Let me read one over here. Critic Mombasa is saying, what's happening in Mombasa? I just heard of 7.1 million county budget for purchase of coffins. The same issue is being put out by a lady called Shufa Yakut, who is saying we need to understand what's going on in Mombasa, shed more light on the free coffins in Mombasa. What's this about, Senator?
I was one actually who raised this issue over the weekend.
Yeah.
You know, there's a proviso within the now estimates of Mombasa, the budget line, written purchase of coffins.
For whom?
Initially, it was 12 million.
Yeah.
Then, with the latest expenditure, with the one that was passed, is 7,510,200 and something.
Yeah.
So I asked the critical question: do you want to create a festive in the hereafter? Is there a tukutane mom akhera kind of a thing?
Yeah.
Is it? So I was asking, when you budget that volume of money, it means over the next year or so you want to bury hundreds of your people. I know you're from Kampala.
Yes.
Did you study in Kampala International University?
I
No,
did.
no, no,
You
no,
did?
no, no.
Do you
No, I
call
didn't.
benevolent fund in that university purchase of coffins? A benevolent fund is just a benevolent fund.
Yes, yes.
So I had two responses from two good people. And it really saddens me when intellectuals work in an arena
Yeah.
where there's both ineptitude and incompetence and ignorance. They are sometimes forced to do things that are really sometimes shameful and unintellectual. So they then come and justify that that was actually an expenditure in terms of projections for it, in terms of obituaries and coffins for their staff in the event they passed on. So in other words, if you were to take the simplistic that figure that they are not disputing, 7.5 million, and divide it by the 70 to 75,000 they give every time somebody passes on, if budgets are still what we know them in Kenya and not Kampala, that they are based on estimates and projections, based on realistic estimates and projections, then they are planning on burying 100 of their employees in the next 1 year. And they have put it, so even if you take that second argument,
Yeah.
they want to have another county meeting where in the hereafter. Because look at it from that. Then I saw one of them saying how a senator gets 10 million. Even if it is true, because we've only lost 2 senators in the last, and I hope it just remains at that, in the last 3-4 years. Senate cannot start planning for the death of 100 senators or 100 of its staff, even whatever the figures might be. The principle here is for you to put a bullet line, which is for all those of us who have studied locally, just know it as purchase of coffins. It's as simple as that. It was intended to be a political exercise. We always bothered as politicians about funeral expenses and all that. So what the intention was, before I pulled the carpet from underneath their feet, was that when you go, they tell you, Sawa, just sign a form here, give us the death certificate, and you find yourself having a geneza process. And I think this is very cheap, very simplistic politics. This goes in that arena where where people buy wheelbarrows for that type of money. Those chairs for some. It's just ridiculous when we create, particularly this year. But senators are saying they're going to be extremely vigilant this year, because they know that it's a political budget.
Because that's your job anyway.
Lastly, there was an issue of public participation. Even my office organized forums around public participation, and even there's a protest in court about lack of sufficient public participation, and in the Senate. So what I'm going to do, in fact, finally somebody from the county, who also has been iked by what is going on in that county, shared some of these documents with me. So we are analyzing them. We have seen provisions of buying residential buildings at 390 million, together with refurbishment of 25 million. So we're still at the point of analyzing buying non-residential buildings, 390 million, without being very specific. What are these residential and non-residential buildings? What are we purchasing? What are we refurbishing? How can you anticipate refurbishing before you even buy? So these are some of the areas. So we are doing a complete analysis. I'm very grateful to some of those guys in the county government and in the county treasury who are helping us to get some of this information, because unless we have whistleblowers, people coming out and giving us this information, telling me about transactions in Shanzu and other places which we might not know of, this rush right now to ensure that you're creating a contract around everything, because this might be your last year as governor. So you want to make sure that you have tied public housing to your own profit. You have tied garbage management to your own. So all these things are coming at the last minute. This is a mad rush usually that happens in any government when it's doing its final year.
Well, some people are saying that, with this whole thing about the coffins going on in Mombasa, they're just trying to discredit the works of the current governor. And I don't know how you're looking at it right now from your perspective, but they're saying, this is just one of those things that we're looking at. Ambrose, I'd like to hear from you on this one before you can respond to it, and Zillian as well.
Maybe Alex Chamwada must have known that
when he was doing that
when
story
he went to
Ghana.
The Gorofa story coffins.
Like, say if you're a contractor.
Like now, maybe that budget is for Chipapa coffins. If you look at it, where I come from, we, even trading in coffins, we are very cautious. Just a business in coffins. Even trading in mortuaries, we are very cautious. That's why they are far off. And even when you trade in it, we are like, what?
Yeah.
and we, as much as we know there's death, we do not expressly budget for death. We budget for life.
Oh, those are the pictures you're
Yes,
talking
all
about.
those ones. Now that one is now
That is in
Chipapa
form
of
of a
Mombasa
cobra.
County.
That-
Coffin. and I think here I would ask Governor Joho, please recheck. Because I know his community, they bury people, they don't need coffins.
Yeah.
And the other community, the other majority, they also cremate people. So who exactly is he budgeting for? My brothers,
which one do you
my
think
brothers
suits-
from
Which one do you think suits a lawyer over there?
that one, the snake one. So who is it budgeting? What are they budgeting for? Is it my brothers or cousins from this other region? I think it should have budgeted for medicine. It should have budgeted for education.
Yeah.
The 5,000 he was giving for bursaries.
Yeah.
Let him take the 7 million shillings
And
and
divert
put it back into bursaries so that we educate our children. When people die, we will come together, collect money, and bury them according to their classes. So that was a mistake that is sending a child into even my spine as a man who believes in God and believe God Almighty go to rest and this body goes to rot. So I don't know. When you meet him, Senator, please tell him where I was very concerned about this budget.
All
for
right,
coffins.
William, let's hear from
all right.
you.
Mine will be that I think the tenets of good governance will require that, one, issues of benevolent funds will professionalize. The executive as such should not delve 100% into such issues. I believe every staff associations, they have welfare associations which are run professionally. They even buy insurance covers for the last benefits and such like. And I think even staff should contribute part of their earnings to that benevolent fund. So I think, just as Senator said, we should be very careful to ensure that such political budgets do not pass because they do not make sense.
All right,
Just one thing you
Senator,
said,
to the
Jordan.
question, you know, some people think that, you know, this is one of those political things to discredit
yeah.
the works of the governor.
There's really nothing to discredit. Trust me. It's like, what do you call it? When I'm in Nasser, was telling Olelenko, what have you been smoking over there?
Yes.
You know, which integrity are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, that's the type of a situation. But in fact, I wish he can come to a debate with me. You know, he sent these sidekicks.
So this is an
and
open
the fact
invite.
that- but what happens is, in fact, for me, he doesn't need even to respond. All I need is for the people of Mombasa to hear. And the thing is, I went into an environment that is so suffocated by an oligarchy of a few friends, and so what has happened? Nobody speaks about anything, and you're told don't criticize, don't critique. But that's what Raila and I and Kalonzo are doing constantly on the national level. It is our work to criticize, to critique, to point out, to finger point. You know, this is the work when you're doing oversight. It's a very murky kind of a job, and you don't have to provide an alternative at this point in time when people are going to say, who provides Sarah? 1 year to the election. Where is Raila's Sarah? Where is Code's Sarah? Sarah right now is that if we are pointing out that don't buy coffins, actually it means I wouldn't buy coffins. If I told you don't do this, it actually means that goes against the grain of my own persona or what I think. So there are different priorities and you need to shift them differently.
All right.
So people must understand the work of oversight as a job that actually is about finger pointing, criticizing, critiquing, and sometimes saying very, very nasty things.
So
Funerals, just let me add,
Yeah.
funerals, we always come together. We came together for Jaramogi, for Malwa, all these big people. If they go, we always put our resources together.
But what
Because
about the smaller people
now that
down in the
one is
counties?
even easier. I do it even when I'm here. You are called so-and-so is dead, you say you need, there's no coffin, so-and-so has
bowl.
taken coffin, a bowl, because we also must eat to
Yeah.
remember that we are on our way, so what we eat is what we count. So we always, otherwise, if we were to budget for it,
Yeah.
I think the national treasury would go bankrupt. So I think here the governor has got it wrong. Somebody better tell him that this one,
And
you've
if they
got
wanted
it
to
wrong.
call it
Alright.
a benevolent fund, those of us who went to universities locally, call it benevolent fund.
Yeah.
Where those of us who studied locally and don't have the benefit of an international degree,
Okay.
we don't call
goodness.
it purchase of coffins. It's simple like
I was
that.
so slow to understanding that one, but now I get it. But since he's an alumni of
Yeah.
William,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Williams University,
Yes.
he needs to come over here and talk
You
about
also
the
did 1 year
benevolent
and did not
fund.
No. I did 5 years I studied law. Yeah, bachelor's degree.
Full-time or part-time?
Full-time, yes.
All right, okay.
From Nairobi.
That said,
was
let's
a
wind up the
resident
conversation
of
about coffins. You
Yes.
know, and that said, I wish you all long life. Yes, I do not wish to get to the point where we're starting to buy coffins for any of you. Now, there's a very interesting story on the front page of the Standard. Divorce millions is a shocker for men, and this is a special report. And they say it's not only the hurt of family breakups that men have to endure. They're now groaning under the weight of huge settlement payouts. And, well, divorce has become an expensive affair, particularly for the rich. And I guess you can't miss out the politicians. The Nairobian last week had a headline about one of the governors who had dumped, you know, his baby mama with a 3-year-old, and that was 3 years ago. So, you know, she's asking for child support, and she's not really being nice about it. She's asking for about 400,000 shillings, which is not really very little money. You know, he might just have to dig into his county funds to take care of his kids, you know. And that is another problem as well,
What happens, politicians, this is one thing I say in here in Parliament, which they say that there are these women, some of them have side children with, who never think that they exist until that day that they're elected into office. I don't say it's right that they were not supporting their kids, but the minute you get elected governor, senator, member of the National Assembly, and whatever else that you are, so suddenly you find a case in court. You know, even one of our colleagues has been trying to fix it through law. You know, so he came through fixer, depending on the moods. But I'm a Muslim, and our perspective on divorce is far more simpler. You know, it's the whole tabulation is there. It is known what rights and obligations accrue to the ex-wife, what rights and obligations accrue to the kids. We are a community that you can never disinherit your kids. You cannot write a will that disinherits your kid. You can only write at a maximum, I think, of 1/3 of your will, of your property as in your will, but you can never disinherit your kids. So our tested regime is very defined, and these are the things that sometimes that lead to people staying in very unhappy marriages because of the cost implication, or leads to what we call marital death, where people, spouses are killing one another on the basis that they do not want them to inherit what they own or what etc. So I think, what happens is this is a part of the evolution of the jurisprudence around civil law.
So they're saying 1 billion shillings is the highest ever amount in a divorce settlement case involving Mohammed Bakresa and his wife Nasra Ahmed. And I think we all know about this story. But then, Ambrose, I'd like to hear you.
I grew up with Nasra.
I think
she stayed right opposite our place. We were here, Nasra and the late brother Abdul Wahab. So they are really, so Nasra is a billionaire.
Oh, wow, all right. My director actually mentioned to me that you were seated at the edge of your seat while talking about divorce, which is not something. But Ambrose, let's hear your take on this.
It is right for people to take care of their children. The only part I find very interesting, and this is done by the courts. First of all, whenever there is a dispute, all children are presented that they are going to private schools. All children, private schools. And then secondly, they are presented to live very high lives. I see cases where entertainment allowance, what allowance.
Yeah, they
so
have
that,
to go to the culture arts academies.
If you are an MCA, your child is this level. If you are an MP, this. So the problem is at the court level. Where they look at the human being, they look at the father, and then they say, you are a governor, you are earning this much, so ordinarily your children should have lived in Kileleshwa, and they should have gone to Braeside Primary School. So that is how you end up being told, pay upkeep 1 million, school fees in this school. If you went by the spirit of the law, it would be providing their food, their accommodation at reasonable standard Kenyan level. So if today, let's say, whether I was to provide, they will say, my children are supposed to go to private schools. And the private schools that normally ladies come up with are normally the high-end ones.
The Pembroke kind of schools.
So I think the courts should be very cautious. But also men should be very careful with their seeds. You don't just plant and then you disappear in thin air and expect, because the
All right.
delinquents we see in
William,
society,
you have
it's
the last
because
word.
of
You have the last word
yeah.
in this one.
Yeah, well, cases in court are won on facts and evidence.
Yeah.
It is true that whenever such decisions are made, they look at the lifestyle which you had taken them through, they are given. But then also being that part of my life, I've also sit as an adjudicator in courts. I think the problem that we have is this glorification of wealth. Right now in our courts, we have so many cases of attempted murder and murder, where spouses want to kill the other spouse so that they inherit that wealth.
Yeah.
So I think it's a societal problem. And true, there has been the commercialization of these divorce settlements.
So people should sign prenups to guard their wealth
No,
as well.
no,
No? No?
But
Yes, you're
unfortunately,
married
that's
for
where,
life.
Bottom
that's
line,
where we are.
if
we are
you are
headed now.
living a good lifestyle, in Islam, whether it's your first wife, second wife, whichever, all the kids must be put at par. All the wives must be put at par. So there is no way you can be in a marriage with a kid, and you're taking your other kids to Braeburn, and that other lady is living in somewhere else. I'll not mention any names, and then taking his kid to some public school. He must be in Braeburn.
All
Or
right.
she must be
Okay.
Allow me just to congratulate the president for being
On the
bold,
interest rates.
bold and
Okay.
able. It was long
Caps.
overdue.
That
These
one.
caps are the way to go. In America, it's the same thing. In Britain, it's only in Kenya where they were taking us around at abracadabra. The curtain has fallen.
All right.
Like circles, let's move forward.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We do appreciate the time taken to come talk to us about what's making headlines and giving us your thoughts on purchase of coffins, among other issues. Hopefully, Governor Hassan Joho can be able to respond to our request. Come over here and sit down with Senator Omar Hassan. Let's talk about what's happening in Mombasa County as well. But Senator, thank you so much. Senator Omar Hassan, Mombasa County, and Advocate of the High Court, William Okech, and Senior Counsel Ambrose Wedder. Thank you all so much for joining us. Let's now take a short break. We'll be back with what's making headlines around the country, and also Toscan is here to give us updates in sports.